How is it that the leading wicket taker of a franchise does not get retained by the franchise ahead of a mega IPL auction? That's exactly what RCB did with Yuzi Chahal back in the year 2022 by not retaining him ahead of the mega auction, and they weren't able to get him back into the fold. Lost him to Rajasthan Royals at the auction, who got him for about 6.5 crores back then. But one of the biggest mysteries that continues to be in IPL history, let's say in the history of auctioneering that we've seen, in fact, over all these years, has been as to why is it that RCB did not retain him in the first place. Director of cricket back in the day for RCB, between that window that you had Yuzi Chahal prosper as a cricketer at the franchise, was Mike Hesson. Yuzi Chahal, by the way, picking up close to 140 wickets for the franchise before he was let go of ahead of the 2022 mega auction. But now we know the reason as to why it didn't quite work out for RCB. It's one of the biggest regrets Mike Hesson says that he will continue to have in his career, but he's now given an insight as to why is it that RCB weren't able to retain him, and he explains this as to what happened during that time when these decisions had to be made. And of course, as with every auction, there was money that had to be taken into consideration, but 4 crore rupees, the incentive of that proving to be costly, as they couldn't ultimately afford a 6.5 crore player eventually. If you only retain 3 players, you give yourself an extra 4 crore, is what he said in the auction, and that potentially gave us the chance to get both Harshal and Yuzi. This was the strategy that RCB had going into the auction. Yes, they got hold of Harshal. They could not get hold of Yuzi because they did not have funds. Where did those funds go? And the story doesn't just stop over there. It also has to do with the number on which Yuzi Chahal came up. Yuzi Chahal's number was number 64 at the auction. There were 63 other players who had already come into auction, rather 65 it was, as Mike Hesson says. So he says that the order of the auction came up and Yuzi Chahal was at number 65. Because we had retained that many players, we were going to get bullied. So those were the reasons for which he says that they could not get Yuzi Chahal back, funds being obviously a large part when you talk about any mega auction or even the mini auction at that. Because Yuzi Chahal came pretty late in the auction as well, the funds had to be then looked into, and given the retentions, they thought they were going to get bullied. What happens later at that auction? Well, we were obviously interested in Hasaranga as another option, he says. So besides Yuzi, Hasaranga was the other player that RCB were looking at. They got hold of Hasaranga at that auction, but they could not go for Yuzi because we bid for Hasaranga upfront, he says, and then once we got Hasaranga, that meant we could not go for Yuzi Chahal. That's the reason that Yuzi Chahal wasn't ultimately being able to come back to RCB, the franchise. He also thought would be bringing him back into the fold after not retaining him, but crucial things that took place there, and it does often end up being the case when things go out of hand at a mega auction. There's too many variables that a franchise needs to think of. But just think about it that way: is 4 crore rupee incentive that RCB had in mind, and they let go of a Yuzi Chahal, ultimately proving to be expensive for them, in fact, because not only did he end up being the purple cap winner that year, RCB continue to work without, even we're in the year 2024 now, 3 seasons since then, and RCB continue to be fraught with that issue, that of a genuine wicket taker, that of a genuine match winner. They still don't have a leading spinner at the moment. It's Karan Sharma, Glenn Maxwell, who together form the spin bowling unit. There's a Mayank Dagar as well, but none of them put together as good as Yuzi Chahal, who continues to be one of the premier wicket takers, and in fact even in this season is in that top bracket as far as the purple cap is concerned.